Folks, welcome back to the Bodybuilding for Everyone podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Disney, and joining me today is Britt Sederholm of Everybody Coaching. Britt, how are you doing?
I'm so good. I'm really excited to be here, and congratulations on this podcast.
Thank you. I hope it, amounts to something someday, but for right now, it's just a fun thing for me, and I'm loving it. So about 2 days ago, Britt, you posted a topic up on your story on Instagram that I thought was really interesting. We went back and forth on it for a little bit, and I thought, hey, we could actually talk about this kind of roundtable format, and that might be pretty productive. So what was that topic?
Yeah, so this is a topic that honestly I have been playing around with in my own head and in my own life for the last couple of years. And Instagram has almost like Twitter did, and you can put up like a little blurb on your stories now. So I put up this little question that said, what do you think about cancel hustle culture? And I got your message that was like, wait, what now? And I loved that because I was like, yes, okay, this I feel like is going to be a great conversation, especially in our fields when we cannot necessarily just cut out hustle altogether. There's a lot of hard work that goes into bodybuilding, coaching, lifestyle athletes. Like, it doesn't just come without any kind of work. And so when I got your message, I was like, yes, let's dive into this.
So just to clarify, are we now canceling hustle culture? Is that what you're starting to see?
That is what I'm starting to see. I think that we as a culture have had this this theme of like working very hard, which is great. And about, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago, it started to really pick up pace, especially with social media, especially with younger generations, people in high school getting into college. And it was like the grind never stops mentality, sleep when you're dead, like
The grind set.
Hustle.
Yeah.
Let the grind set.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Really kind of romanticizing it almost. We have these clips of like entrepreneurs and millionaires and quote unquote self-made people putting out just fucking work and
yes, wake up at 4 a.m. like never stop. You can sleep when you're dead.
right.
Where are the times that you're not being the most productive that you can be 24/7?
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially with the younger generation at that time, which was like myself included, I was, getting out of high school, I was experiencing college, and it just felt like the most intense pressure to be extremely successful at such a young age.
Mm.
And I think, I definitely fell into that, and I fell into a lot of the negative connotations that come with it and some of the toxicity that you hear people talking about now. And then just a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, there started to be more of a movement of like, hey, rest is important. Like, you do need time to sleep. You do need time to take care of yourself. You do need to pour into other areas of your life. And that was such a breath of fresh air. But as we typically do, humans kind of love to go from one extreme to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm seeing all of this content about basically like canceling hustle culture.
Okay.
You don't need to work as hard. And I think it's negatively translating into the health and fitness arena in a sense that it's almost like over-promising, especially to lifestyle athletes and aspiring competitors, that you can get those goals without working hard.
Right. That's the key there, is that there's some validity to it, but it's over-promising, overselling, and oversimplifying the nuance, right? Because yeah, we can apply this to bodybuilding and lifestyle, just the bodybuilding lifestyle in general, but also like in a societal context where
Yes.
the pendulum swings the other way, right? And it seems like it's been exacerbated with how social media operates, because our attention span is getting shorter and shorter, so the content is getting shorter and shorter form.
Yes.
So we need to catch someone's attention with our reels, but we
Mhm.
only have a few seconds really to keep their attention. And so you have to say the most dramatic thing, the most almost polarizing thing, and then you don't have enough time to actually dive in and explain, the nuance of what you mean. And so people are left with this incomplete message. An oversimplified message, no matter how accurate, becomes misinformation when you
Yes.
can't, really explain what you mean. So, okay, so you notice that.
Mhm.
Where does your head go, and what's next?
That's such a good question. Because like I said, it's kind of been a personal journey for myself as well. And when I found myself a few years back, honestly, just becoming extremely miserable because I was not resting, I was not ever giving myself that grace or just the ability to actually enjoy what I had been successful in and what I had created and just even be present in that moment. That's where I started seeing, okay, like I do understand the negative to the extreme side of it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I started to fall into that trap of like, yeah, fuck this, like cancel hustle. Like we do not need that much aggressive push at such a
Mhm.
young age in your 20s, even your 30s.
Yeah.
But then like I said, I've started to see that become negatively impactful as I started coaching and being able to interact with more people and touch more lives. I could see that so many people were caught up in the fact of them not knowing, like, hey, I don't know when to give myself grace and I don't know when to push myself harder.
Right. Right. It's not a matter of one is superior to the other. It's knowing which tool is the right tool for the job, in the given circumstance. And it seems like this is just it's like a repeat of the gripe against the body positivity movement within the fitness community, right?
Exactly.
It's important to recognize that your self-worth is not in any way tied to your physique. Um, and give yourself that grace, but at the same time, I mean, what it seems like that turned into was an opposite message of like, you don't need to be, or at least this was, I don't even, I think there were some people who intentionally did this because polarizing stuff sells. But yeah, it's the same
Right.
thing of like, oh no, you don't need to do this anymore. This is actually wrong. Don't try to work out. If you try to be healthy and fit and everything, you're buying into this toxic culture, which
Yes.
any culture, any ideology taken to an extreme becomes, toxic, quote
Toxic.
unquote. Right. But
Absolutely.
but everything in moderation. So it seems like to me really similar to that. How are
No,
you? Oh, yeah, yeah.
sorry. I just think that's such a great point. And that's actually I love how you said I love how you said that because I was thinking about it earlier this week and I was like, you know what? I think one of the biggest issues about this is people get so caught up in feeling like whatever decision they are making in this moment is forever. And
Hmm.
that their goal that they're working on right now means that that is the rest of their life.
Oh yeah.
It's so hard for us to see the bigger picture at times, especially when a goal does take, some blinders and narrow focus. And it can be really easy to get caught up in that. Like it's very similar to just like the phases that you go through with physique changes, right? Whether you are in a fat loss phase or whether you are in a growth phase, both of those serve a very specific purpose for a certain amount of time. And you do at some point need to choose between one or the other, or you're just going to keep spinning your wheels, not making progress in either area.
Right.
Very similar to this, like, hey, you're not going to be in a fat loss phase forever. You're not going to be in a growth phase forever. This push of intense work ethic might not be forever. That is okay. But you might need that intense push for a certain amount of time. And then you can have your break, which again won't be forever. But it's so hard for us in the moment to remember that.
It is. It's hard to zoom out, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that kind of is a nice segue to a direction I thought could be good to move this conversation is when I'm looking at a problem like this, it helps me a lot to kind of zoom out and try to figure out like where it started from, right? And we've kind of done that a little bit, but I even further, if we look at this from in a societal context, I can see how there is some jadedness within, I don't even know what community to call it, the working community, I guess, because, well, cost of living is getting higher, wages are not growing to meet this. So we're being continually encouraged by people who are really, really successful. And so it's easy for them to say, it seems like, right? Sure, they did suffer to get to where they are and everything, but it seems in this moment now easy for them to say like, oh, just fucking work harder.
Yes.
We're being encouraged to just grind ourselves into the dirt, while it doesn't seem like, it seems like things are continually being taken away from us. Everything is getting more expensive. Life is getting more expensive. People aren't able to afford to have kids, and people are just getting really irritated. And like, I understand,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's kind of that pushback of like, hey, we have had enough of this. And what you're saying makes total sense. It is on a way larger scale. Obviously, it's so much more micro focused in our arena of work, but it is such a larger scale. Like, you could take this so far back. I mean, people think about our grandparents, our great grandparents, like they did have to work so hard. They did have to suffer and give up a lot and sacrifice a lot. And at the same time, life was completely different. They did not have the amount of stimulus that we have now. They did not have the ability to see so many people, so many different lifestyles, so much success on such a large scale and have that amount of pressure. And they also honestly didn't like have as long of lifetimes, right? So everything was happening in a much shorter span of time. So people were getting married younger, they were having families younger, they were buying houses for much less at a much younger age. But then they also didn't always live to be that old. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So they had to live faster.
Yeah, they had to live faster.
Yeah. This is a conversation I've had with a lot of older folks, my parents' age and stuff, just kind of, again, a little bit of disillusionment on my part. Like, wow, not disregarding the work that everybody had to put in prior generations, but it seemed like the rewards were more accessible. And it seems like you said, I didn't even think about this, but the stimulus that it's being applied to us in all ways is so much greater than it ever was before. We have the internet in our face. We see what's happening in the world, and we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders because we see all these crazy things that are happening. Our attention spans have changed. The way we process dopamine has just changed, I think, as a whole, because of how we're all exposing ourselves to social media and the scrolling mechanism.
Yes.
And so our response to stress, including self-imposed stress of like working hard, is different than it used to be. And so I think our strategies for how we rest and recuperate do need to change. But that's not to say we can get rid of the work ethic, right? And so how do we communicate to the people on both ends of this spectrum, right? And help them to find their, the missing piece that's keeping them from the middle. For people who are getting disillusioned and are jaded and are saying, no, fuck grind culture, like this is enough. I'm working my ass off and I don't feel like it's paying off. How do we reason with that?
No, that's a great question. And I think both ends of the spectrum need a slightly different approach. And this is something I've thought about. I think that those who are truly on that side of like, I am working myself into the ground, I am losing myself, I don't feel like I'm working in alignment. I think that there is so much truth to that. And like I said in my post earlier this week, I was like, I do not agree with ignoring rest. I do not think it's healthy to live extremely restricted. I don't believe in disregarding like your intuition, or committing to fit yourself into a box or a mold or acting out of alignment with yourself. I do not agree with any of that. And if that is what you're feeling, then I do believe that you need to trust that. That is your intuition. And I think that you do need to explore the side of rest a little bit more. And one thing that somebody told me that is so simple, but was so monumental for me, was I was in the middle of coming out of that same place of, I just cannot do this anymore. I cannot work in this way. And I was like, but I am so afraid of that rest because this is all I've ever known. And this is all that's ever worked for me. I don't have proof of rest being successful for me in the past because I've never done it. So I'm so terrified that if I pull back, I am going to lose everything, or I am not going to be successful in the way that I think I need to be successful. And they told me, Britt, you are right. You have always been this way. And because of that, I think that you need to trust that you won't ever let yourself get into a position where you are severely struggling. And if the worst was to happen, you know how to work yourself out of it. So I think, number one, allowing yourself, if you are on that extreme end, to get the experience of practicing rest and see how that works in your life is so important. It's kind of one of those things where it's almost like exposure therapy. Like, to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah.
The only way out is through.
Yeah.
You
That's really good. I like it's really similar to what we see in coaching, right? Is especially, or at least for me, a lot of the demographic that I end up working with are people who are doing too much. And it's funny, they're doing too much, but they're not doing it well enough, right?
Yes.
They're training 7 days a week, but the quality of their sets is poor. The quality of their reps is poor. Their volume is all over the place. They're not resting enough. And so, but they don't know how to stop, right? But they make leaps and bounds of better progress once we start to pull back. Okay. So we pull back the amount of work they're doing, but just by doing that, the quality of their work leaps, right?
Yeah, their progress skyrockets.
So I wonder if did you see something similar as far as your work and just in life in general, when you stopped running yourself into the ground and started taking time, for yourself, to rest and recuperate more strategically? Was the quality of the work that you did improved? Were you able to be more efficient with the work that you did?
Yes. So this is something I've seen in multiple facets of my life. And it's also something that, just like I said, I've had to experiment with. It's not something that I made a switch to and was immediately successful with.
Right.
There were multiple different ways that you can go about it, levels of rest that you take and how you incorporate it. So there was honestly a lot of trial and error. And I think that that is what people need to hear, that like, you are allowed to have trial and error with this, just like any other aspect. But with my own personal physique, same exact thing that you're describing. I was overtraining, undereating, overdoing all of the stimulus, just in a physical sense. I got a really great coach, Mark, at the time. And then I've switched to Leah since then, and they're both wonderful. They've taught me so much. And my progress skyrocketed. They pulled my training down. They pulled my stimulus down. They made me focus on recovery. And it was, my physique is night and day different. But in my professional life, same thing. I had to do two different things with this, though. I had to, first of all, ask myself really, really hard questions and dig deep into, why am I feeling so much pressure to be successful? in a certain way or in a certain arena. And that was monumental for me. And that took a very long time. And it's still something that I have to check in on myself and make sure I'm asking that question over and over again. Because I do think that people on that extreme end, at times, they're simply just overworking. But at other times, it's because they have taken on other pressures, other people's expectations, societal expectations, and this idea of what success is, and they don't actually align with that. So no wonder they are hating working 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, you know? So for me, I really had to ask that when I figured out, okay, maybe this isn't my idea of success in this arena and it's over here. I took a big leap of faith on that. That was terrifying. I actually quit my very well-paying, stable job with no backup plan. And that's when I started coaching. So I don't necessarily suggest everybody take such an extreme approach.
Right.
Was, you know, the leap of faith that I needed. And so I did pull back a lot. I went from working 80 hours a week to starting coaching. I had like 3 athletes, you know, so I'm working 5, 10 hours a week and just pouring all my other time into learning and developing tools and becoming a better coach. And next thing you know, like a year down the road, again, I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. But now I don't feel as exhausted.
Right.
Now I know when, hey, I'm not saying the right things to my athletes. No content is coming to my brain when it comes to social media. Maybe I need to take some time for me. Maybe I need to take a break, you know?
And now once you know that once you do that, you'll be successful in that, you know, you'll recuperate and things will come back to you.
Yes.
I think
I have experience to learn like, hey, I'm gonna be okay if I rest and I can still succeed. But I've also had times where I was like, ooh, maybe I am not pushing hard enough now. Maybe I have scaled back a little bit too much. And then that also creates an anxiety of, hey, you're not working hard enough. And then I flip the role and I'm like, okay, so now I'm learning that balance.
That balance. We'll get into that next because that's the other end of the spectrum.
Yes.
But just to touch on a little bit of what you said a lot of really great stuff there. I think the idea of success, kind of your idea of success constantly shifting, and is interesting. And almost what it made me think of is like, well, you may have an idea of success, but if you start getting all these inputs from social media is a huge one, right? You see all these different definitions of success and they start to bleed into, you know, what you're internalizing as your idea of success, to the point where, at least for me, I start taking actions like to start moving me in slightly different directions, which I'm not taking the full action to get in that direction. And it's taking away resources from pursuing what it is I actually want, right? We need to really, we need to thoroughly define what it is we want. And when I see other forms of success, when I see an entrepreneur on Instagram with a motivational reel, whatever, that's fine. But I need to take that message and apply it to my specific definition of success for me, you know, that's in alignment with my personal goals. Not go, oh shoot, I need to start that kind of business too. What kind, you know, because that just starts taking away resources that I'm expending towards my main goal. And I start, you know what I mean? Like
what you're saying is so good. And it really brings it back to what we started speaking about at the beginning, which was this idea of the society we live in now and the culture, and how social media specifically, because it's not a long forum talk like this, you only have so much time to get a point across. You only have so much time to catch people's attention. So it's really polarized thinking. And because of that, if I took 10 minutes to scroll on my Instagram right now, I would see successful entrepreneurs. I would see successful, like photographers, successful people who just travel for a living, people
Right.
who are successful in their own way as writers, living in a van, like, or living in mansions, like just completely different ends of the spectrum. And they're all successful, and they're all telling us that we need to live a certain way. And because of that, I have to check myself all the time, because I do the same thing that you do. I'm like, oh shit, maybe I need to be doing more of this and not so much of this. And that's where it becomes so confusing for people, because
Yeah.
they are so in tap with other people's missions that they are losing their own. And because of that, it again ties us back to that idea of like, this is not forever. Put your focus on what you want right now, on that goal, and go after it for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years. Like, you can give yourself a time frame if you want, if
Mm-hmm.
that's easier for you, but go after that 1, 2, maybe 3 things.
Yeah.
And know that at any point, if that's no longer in alignment with you, you are allowed to shift gears and put that effort into another arena.
That's huge. But
Yeah.
at the same time, just reiterating what you said, when you choose a goal that you really want to basically specialize in for a temporary period of time,
Mhm.
you gotta move, you gotta put your resources into that. You can't spread yourself too thin. And so you need to accept at the very beginning that certain other facets of your life are going to take a sideline. And that means
Yes.
sometimes you don't get them done. And that's
Yes.
okay. You know,
Mhm.
it's okay because it's temporary and you've kind of set this up to begin with. You've thought it through so you know that you can get by with letting those things take a back seat.
Mhm.
But then you have to follow through on that too. So I, I've got so many like tangents
I
I want to go
know.
off on this, but I mean,
No.
I think back to what my first couple years in fitness,
Mhm.
I had a really hard time pinpointing what it is I wanted to do, right? Like deep
Yes.
down, I wanted to get jacked and lean. I wanted to look good, but I was in an environment where it wasn't cool. You know, it was like kind
Mhm.
of like it was this too surface level. So it was really no, I want to be strong and healthy and lean, and I want to have a big powerlifting total. And but even that was like all over the place. And so I'd
Oh,
constantly be doing what all young new people do is flip-flopping on
yep.
programs. I'd be doing a fucking a powerlifting program and then switch to a Charles Poliquin bodybuilding program from the 80s. And, you know, like switching so rapidly that I didn't make progress in any meaningful direction because I kept changing the direction that the rudder was facing. So the
Yep.
ship's like going back and forth where it could have just gone straight
Yeah.
and made a, so yeah, wow.
No, it's such a hard concept for people to understand, and it makes sense, right? Like, we say this and it's like, obviously. But when you are the one trying to make the decisions, trying to put the effort in towards your goals, we're emotional people and we are attached to the outcomes, and therefore things get really, really foggy. And not to plug coaching or anything, but that is where
That
having a coach comes,
that's where my head went too.
you
You
know?
It's so much easier to be objective from the outside in
Yeah,
because it doesn't matter. It's not about you. But
exactly.
it's really hard to be objective with yourself. And so, yeah, plug for coaching.
Yeah.
People, you know, I was talking about this to multiple people yesterday. If I want to plan for retirement, I hire a financial planner
Thank you.
because they are specialized. They've done this for a long time. They've done it for a lot of different people. They have zero emotional attachment to my outcome.
Speed up your process.
You're leveraging all the years and time they spent getting good at that. I
100%.
don't want to spend, you know, if my pipes burst, I hire a plumber to come fix it. I'm not going to take the hours I'm going to need to learn how to fix pipes, right? Like
100%.
especially if I have a problem like my fucking roof is leaking. I'm going to
I'm
I'm
gonna
going to hire a
outsource.
specialist. It's going to
Yeah.
save me time, and time is the most valuable resource we have.
Mhm.
Um so yeah, bringing it back to the topic of like your idea of success shifting all the time, we have a finite amount of energy that is our main resource, right? And it needs to be, if we want to really be making like rapid progress and continual progress in whatever it is, we need to pick what we want, and we need to let all of our available resources go to that. And the time that we spend not doing that should be spent on doing things that will, compound that. So resting, decompressing.
I completely hear what you're saying. And I think there was one part of that I also wanted to bring to light that you said, where you were talking about your own experience and you're saying, both in your physique side, but also now as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, like you sometimes are on social media, or you even hearing your other successful friends and all of the different routes that they're taking, it gets you in your head and you're like, oh, maybe I need to start putting energy towards this. And now you're putting 20% energy towards 5 different things. And again, you don't feel like you're doing enough. You don't feel successful because you're not succeeding in those 5 different aspects because you're only capable of putting 20% in them. Right. But putting 100% in 5 different things also will leave you feeling like shit because it doesn't last, or you run yourself into the ground. So now you're faced with the same situation, but on 2 different spectrums.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah,
so
you're right.
And people are always like, well, I want this balance. I want this balance. And I'm telling you, as somebody who fed into that and believed that so hard for so long, and it never worked, it's because that balance is an empty promise that does not exist. Because if you're saying you want balance in all 5 of your priorities, that means you're giving 20% to 5 things. And instead, you need harmony.
First of all, I love that. You feel like you're not doing enough because you're not doing enough for any specific thing, right?
Yes.
You're trying to do too much. But I have another perspective on the idea of balance. And I think people mess up where we're trying to have balance like on a day-to-day scale. If you pick 3 goals and you divide the year up, the 3 goals in different directions, but like a hell, whatever.
Yeah.
You pick your 3 goals, you divide your year up across those 3 goals. When in each individual phase, in each 4-month period, you're not balanced. You're really going all in on one of those things. But if you zoom out on a macro scale and look at the year was balanced. You spent a portion here, a portion here, a portion here. You made great progress in all 3 of these areas. And when you look at the whole year, that is balance.
Yes.
When I think about physique endeavors, you can't just like grow muscle and lose fat all the time, right? You need periodized phases where you are adding tissue. Then you need periodized phases where you are polishing up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you zoom out and I look at the last, really my whole entire fitness career, if I look at the last 9 years, it's just been steadily, progressing. It's actually like this, right? But as a whole, there is balance, right? We have excess and deficiency. It's just we can't balance at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I think I'm stealing this term from somebody. And I even reached out to one of my friends because I was like, am I plagiarizing you? And she was like, no, that wasn't me. But the idea of harmony over balance was something that I really liked because people do like to put a label on things, right? So giving somebody, hey, here's a replacement term for the term balance, I think is helpful in them making that mindset shift, because just like you said, people get caught up in the day-to-day of it. And it's like, this week, I was so successful in my business. I added 3 new athletes. I put out this podcast. I blah, blah, blah. That's all great. But then some people will also be like, but I didn't talk to my mom as much as I should have. I didn't see my friend. I didn't have my date night. I didn't get to eat like some super enjoyable foods, things like that. And it's
so now it's a failure.
Now it's a failure. And you're tainting the progress that you did make.
Mhm.
So if you are focused more so on the harmony aspect, that means that you are allowing yourself the ability to still have your top 5 priorities, but give different levels of effort to them at different times.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Whatever you decide, hey, this is really what my focus needs to be for this week, this month, this 4 months, whatever it is, you are allowing yourself to put 80-90% of your focus into it, because you know that those areas that are only getting 10-15-20%, they will have their time to have more effort.
Yeah. And you know what I'm just realizing now? The amount of time that you need for each individual task is not gonna be the same, right? So
So good.
so
Yeah.
the amount of time that you can spend is, let's say your 2 goals are work and decompression, relaxation, for the purpose of refreshing yourself so that you can get back to work and be productive. Let's say you can work hard for, 3 months, like really just like grind it out for 3 months.
Mhm.
You don't need another 3 months of like complete relaxation to offset that. You
Yeah.
can you can get yourself back to, back to being ready and refreshed in like a week or 2, like a vacation, right? You take a vacation, a week-long vacation to somewhere in the tropics, and
You're like,
you're ready. In
yeah.
fact, if you stretch that vacation for too long, you're probably itching to get back to work, you
Yep.
know?
And then you feel that other side where you're like, ooh, I'm not doing enough.
So
Yeah.
so the net is still a lot more total time put
Mhm.
into work and making progress, but
Yes.
you're allowing yourself that grace, that recovery period, to make sure that your efforts, as time progresses, your efforts spent in doing work are still productive. You know,
Yes.
um, that sounds like a 7-day work week. That sounds like what a 7-day work week was supposed to be. 5 days of work, 2
Uh-huh.
days of relaxation. It doesn't work anymore because of how modern life has changed, but there was a time
Right.
when that worked. You get
Right.
2 days to do nothing, I'll be ready to work my ass off for 5 days, and
Right.
I'll be happy to do it.
Exactly. And now for some people, it's, hey, I'm ready to work my ass off for a month straight, but then I want a week to 2 weeks off.
Then yep,
Or
yep.
other people, it's, I'm going to work super hard for 2 days, take 1 day off, 2 days, 1 day off. So yes, the structure of how it used to be does need to change individually for different people.
Mhm.
But the idea itself wasn't necessarily like bad, you know?
No.
One thing I did want to kind of segue into before we get to the other extreme side, where it's the people who kind of need that kick in the butt, you know,
Mhm.
is also the idea though that, hey, your work, your focus and energy might need to go to things that doesn't feel like work for you, right? And that is the work itself. Like if you are somebody who's so type A, or you are so focused on the hard work and the, that extreme grind,
Yes.
hey, your
Yes.
hard work is going to be the opposite of what you've always thought it was. Your hard work is rest.
Yes, that's it. I say that to people, to, again, exactly as you were thinking, to the really type A people. Resting is an activity. You
Mhm.
are actively checking something off of the box of your list of things to do when you take the time to rest, right? Like that's important, because it's just like in training. You need rest periods between sets. You need
Yes.
rest days between training days, and you need deload periods between training blocks.
Mhm.
If you don't take rests between your exercises, you're not gonna be able to keep working out. You're gonna
Right.
last like 15 minutes.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
but if you rest strategically, now your
Mhm.
ability to perform and to put in good quality work skyrockets. Now you
Yeah,
can train for 2 hours. Two,
exactly.
hours in the gym.
Right. And this is why I wanted to bring this up so badly before we got into the side where it's like, hey, you guys stop living on the sidelines of your life, take action. Like you do need to put in work here.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to bring this up before we get to that point is because some of those people that need to put in work is putting in work towards rest.
Yes.
towards the area that is uncomfortable for them, because everybody's heart is going to be different. And that's what I tell my athletes all the time. You know, I've got both ends of the spectrum, hardcore. I mainly focus on lifestyle athletes, and I've got lifestyle athletes who, like, I mean, they're in it. They've been training, they work hard. They've got great physiques and they want to go to that next level. And for a lot of them, even if they're not like taking their physique to the next level, but they are just so type A, for a lot of them, I have to tell them, hey, look, your hard is different from other people's hard. And when you see these motivational videos and these ideas of grind, 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 not every message is for you. And you need to understand that, like, if that doesn't feel like it resonates with you, if that only makes you stress more, like, your hard work is the opposite. And then I've got this other side of people who it's like, hey, you've never felt what it feels like to grind and work so hard and care so much about something and get it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
fail and then have to do the same thing and then finally win.
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
Yeah, it all comes in the topic of social media and how it applies to this, and seeing things that may or may not resonate. It all comes back to what we said at the beginning, where they're sound bites, and so they're oversimplified, and you can't get into nuance. And unfortunately, we evolved. Social media was originally a social thing, you know, and originally you were only exposed to people that you knew. I didn't have MySpace friends I didn't know in person, you know, not really, not more than maybe a couple. When Facebook was cool, it was people from my high school, people that I met from other schools, from parties, or people that I met from, like, I mean, I was going into the city, so shows and stuff like that, you know, but it was all people that I'd interacted with in the real world in some way. And so I wasn't being exposed to like things that were way outside of, you know, similar goals to mine or similar lives to mine. Now I log on to social media and algorithms show me shit that I don't even follow. So they show me Alex Hormozy telling me how to open a successful chain of gyms. Right. Well, that's not, that wasn't even on my radar. Is that something I need to do? Am I behind? Am I failing? And so, but that's not going to change. You know, social media has incentive for people who produce stuff. They're making money. They're not going to change what they're doing. So we, the consumer, need to change how we approach it and how we internalize the messages that we receive.
Absolutely. And it's not that people are doing anything wrong. You know, they are speaking their truth. They are talking about what they know works, and they're talking about it to the audience, supposed to be talking about it to the audience that wants to follow what they've done and are inspired by what they do. Right? So it's our job as consumers, it's our job as social media platform holders to understand that not every message is for you, and to be able to filter these things through, and even cultivate the social media that you want to see, so that it is something positive for you, rather than pointing fingers and feeling trapped and feeling like you have no way out of it, because it can be so isolating in that way, until you take that power back and that control back and say, no, I can filter through these messages and decide what's right for me. And still know that the person putting that message out there has good intent for their audience. It's just not what I need to see.
They're not talking to me.
Exactly.
They're talking to whoever needs to hear that.
Exactly.
And that may not be me.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, really, we as a society need to learn how to consume content more, I guess, proactively, or just in a more healthy way, because the style of content's not going to change. That's dictated by who watches what. And the stuff, I mean, a lot more people out there, I think, well, I don't even know. There are clearly enough people out there who want to get motivated, who buy into this motivational stuff that, you know, fuels the continued production of motivational content. Yeah. So
Absolutely. And then there's, there's clearly enough people who are feeling the pushback against that to now fuel this idea of canceling hustle culture, right?
Right. Right.
And there are people who need that hustle. They need to learn how to produce work ethic for themselves. And that's where I think it gets really confusing for them, because now they're seeing both sides of the spectrum as somebody who's just getting into whatever their goal is, right? And obviously we can talk about and relate the most to the health and fitness industry. So you have all of these new athletes, all of these new clients who are like, okay, I want to get healthy. I want to build a better physique. And then they're bombarded with everything that says, well, this isn't healthy. This isn't balanced. This isn't okay either. And then the other side being like, you need to work harder. You need to grind. You need to have better discipline. And these new people, these poor new people are just like, am I doing everything wrong?
The best thing I can suggest to new fitness people who are new to fitness is like, get rid of your social media.
Yeah.
Because the information is all good in a specific context, but it's not all for you at this period of time. And don't make the mistake that I made and that a lot of us made early on, which was, as soon as I I was reading, I'd read a new piece of information with a new, like, oh, you could do this to get this result, immediately trying to work that into my program. And then it just throws off the whole program.
Yeah.
Stick with what you're doing. And if you don't know what the best thing to do is, hire someone who knows to take you through it, and then disregard everything else. It's not that other advice out there is wrong. It's just, you're already on a specific path. Follow that path until it reaches completion. And then you can look at maybe incorporating some other thing or pursuing some other slightly, variant goal.
Right. I wanted to hear your opinion on this idea, because as I was like getting ready for bed last night, I was thinking about this podcast, and I'm like, I've got so much to say when it comes to this topic. But I think what people are really going to want, because what everybody really wants is to be told, well, here's your answer. And while I literally want a sweatshirt, I swear I'm working on this, that says it depends, right?
I like that.
I'm working on that.
That's a great idea.
I'll let you know. So it does depend. And everybody is too different. Everybody's situations is too different for me to give you a straight up answer. But I do think that a good rule of thumb is, if you've always found yourself leaning towards more of one side or the other, one extreme or the other, whether you have leaned a little bit too much towards running yourself into the ground, or you've leaned a little bit too much towards not doing enough, I honestly think that the best thing you can do is experiment with leaning towards the other side.
Yeah.
Because if your comfortability is in one extreme, it is very likely that you won't flip to the other extreme and stay there.
That's a good point.
So I do think that it's good to encourage those people to, hey, test the waters in this other area. Test what it's like to be a little bit more disciplined with yourself, to give yourself a little bit more sacrifice, and see what the payoff is of that. If you find yourself sacrificing too much, working in an environment that doesn't align with you, and you give that some time and you decide, okay, this isn't being productive in a positive way for me anymore, I need to scale back a little bit again, give myself a little bit more freedom, give myself a little bit more rest again. That's how you find what works for you. That's how you find that balance, is by trial and error. You don't know until you know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there is a big fear when you lean really heavily into doing things a certain way of, well, if I don't want to try it this other way. And I don't know if we even really fully ever dive into why that fear is. It just exists. It could be we're afraid that we won't make it back. It could be we're afraid that it's the wrong choice for us. And for some reason we forget that it can be temporary. That's okay. we're
Mhm.
really bad humans are really bad at thinking
So
long
bad.
term. Like
So bad.
like the way I do things has to be the right way. You know what I
Yes.
mean? To the point where it's
Yes.
our identity and we get offended if someone suggests we do things differently.
Yeah.
Um, which is a problem, right? We need to remove ourselves. Our the way we feel is not who we are. It's not our identity.
Yep.
And to a point, even our actions aren't our identity, you
Yeah.
know? And so, yeah. So you want my thoughts on specifically what?
On how on the answer that you would give people to who are asking you, hey, like, I don't know when to give myself more grace, when to rest more, and I don't know when to push more. I feel
Mm,
like I keep doing one or the other too quickly, and I'm just stuck. Nothing feels productive or right.
hmm.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And yeah, like it depends, right?
Yeah.
This is why I have a really hard time giving answers because I don't want to give an incomplete answer. But
Yes.
the amount of time and effort it takes to dive into like to cover all the different variables of
Mhm.
like, well, if this, then this, but if this, then this, it's huge. And so when I work with somebody one-on-one, I can get their specific circumstances all laid out in front of me. And then I can make, decide what calls to make.
100%.
If I mean, a really, really oversimplified, really, oh, I cannot stress this is oversimplified. So this is not, don't do this literally, but like, if you feel like you can do more, do more. And if you feel like you can't, then do less, I
Yeah.
guess. And eventually you kind of work your way, you got to freestyle it for a little bit. And eventually you kind of work yourself into a rhythm where you figure out, okay, I can push for 3 days, rest for one, push for
Yep.
3 days, rest for one, or in the context of a single day, I can work for, you know, 8 hours. I mean, that's how a workday works, right? You work hard for 8 hours, you relax the rest, but truly you're not because you come home, there's still chores to do. There's still, and so those have to count as work. So really it's, I can be productive for 10 hours a day,
Mhm.
11 hours a day, and I need 8 hours of sleep. And I can't do math in my head, but the remaining amount of time, that's my rest time. It's conscious rest time. So
Yes.
I'm awake, but I'm intentionally letting my brain rest. I'm letting my body rest. You
Yeah.
know, you start to figure out how much time you need. It's the same with when I work with somebody in training,
Yes.
like in training programming. It takes some time to figure out, some
Yeah.
people can go 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks in a training
Mhm.
block, progressively overloading before they need to deload. Some people can only make it 5
Yeah.
before they,
Or even more simplified, you get the really, really new people who are like, how long should this workout take me?
as long as it
And
takes.
exactly. And so I appreciate the vulnerability in the simplified answer because I actually think that that is what people need because I've said it, but I'm saying it again. The only way out is through. And the only way to figure out what balance looks like for you is to experiment in both arenas.
Yeah.
If you refuse to stay or refuse to leave where you're at, if you decide to stay in this position, you are holding yourself back in that sense. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And that that is where you stay stuck. Like you do need to take messy action at times. You have to be willing to try it and fail at it, whether that's pushing yourself harder and failing, or whether it's, trying to rest more and you're like, oh shit, I totally missed the mark and I underachieved what I was supposed to do this week. Okay, well, now you have a better understanding of how to make adjustments, right? And that's exactly like working with an athlete, it's like,
Yeah.
I can't tell you exactly what weight to use. I can't tell you exactly how long this is going to take you. I can't tell you how much fat you're going to lose, how much muscle you're going to put on, because this is a trial and error process for
I
you.
can just I can tell you how we're gonna figure it out,
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
then we're gonna figure it out. And I think you found it. There's the middle ground that we're looking for, right?
Mhm.
And it's, you need to keep moving, right? We
Yeah.
can't stay stagnant. And what that means is if you're doing something, but doing the same thing over and over is still, for this, all intents and purposes in this context, not moving, right? You're not achieving what you want to achieve, and the thing that you're trying is not getting you there. And so you need to be willing to keep, quote unquote, moving forward by utilizing different tools. And so if you're someone who's busting ass and you're not getting where you want to go, if you're busting ass and you're getting where you want to go and it's sustainable, then fuck balance, you know, just keep doing what you're doing. And same thing, if you're resting all the time, if you're not doing anything, but you're making, your life is working, you're making an income, you're happy, you're healthy,
Great.
you don't need to grind. You know what I mean? But for most people, they need, you know, a little bit of both to get where they're trying to go. We're all after fulfillment and financial independence and just, you know, safety, right? And like just the happiness, right? So if you're busting ass and you're not getting where you want to go, or you're not getting there fast enough, or you're finding yourself slowing down, even though you're trying everything you can, well, then maybe, so you're in the same place. So maybe it's time to try another tool, fucking rest for a little bit and then get back to it and see. And if you're, you know, unable to get out of bed in the morning, and well, that's a whole nother thing. But if you're really, really almost being too lenient on yourself and your life is not going where you want to go, and this is the more obvious one, it's kind of a trope, honestly, then yeah, you need to fucking get up and you need to work harder. You need to push harder. And there's a lot.
No, go ahead.
There's a lot that goes into that. That's really oversimplifying it. And I don't mean to make light of a circumstance that is difficult. If it wasn't difficult, so many people wouldn't fall into that camp. So that is not to discount the struggle. But when you simplify it, everything down to, you know, the most basic kind of look at it, like, this is what's happening, this is what you need.
Yes. No, and I really appreciate how you articulated that, because at first, if I had been listening to this, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I heard you say, if you aren't where you want to be, you need to move. And the answer on either spectrum is to continue moving forward. My type A ass would have been like, so I need to work harder. And it's like, no, bitch, you need to move in a way that you haven't been moving.
Yeah.
You need to move forward. You need to try something different. Your work needs to be in an area that you haven't tried yet, or that you've been successful in yet.
Work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, go ahead. No, you're good.
Okay. I was just going to say, I really, really loved your post earlier this week too, because I felt like it was the perfect polar opposite to mine.
Was it the same day?
I think it was the same day, because I had put something out there that was like more on the, hey, you need to like rest side. And then I see yours and it was like, stop fucking sitting on the sidelines of your own life. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh, yes. This is the meat in the middle that we need.
It's hard to articulate this idea, but like, we need to zoom out and apply these terms to like a larger scale. So staying the same, so sitting on the sidelines, right, doesn't mean you're not physically doing something. It just means, I mean, you're in a rut. If I'm working really, really hard, but I'm doing it the same way all the time and I'm just not making the progress, I'm still sitting on the sidelines because I'm not willing to change the way things are going, you know? So I'm still stagnant regardless of the actual work that I'm doing. Yeah. So.
Oh, so good though. So good. And then on the flip side though, I do think, you know, like you said, like this wouldn't be such a hard situation for people to get out of if it wasn't so hard, right? The side where it's like, they do struggle with their work ethic. They do struggle with discipline. And unfortunately, a lot of those people, they are truly sitting on the sidelines watching the game, and the game is their life. Yeah. And they're watching other players dictate how the game goes. They're watching the other team score, and they're not stepping in to take the action to make the change. And at the end of the day, like this, you are in so much more control. And I think that that is the most terrifying thing for people to hear, is that, hey, you're in control of this. And it's also the most comforting and liberating thing, because no matter what external circumstances come at you, no matter what shitty cards you were dealt with, you do have some control here.
You still have choices. Yeah.
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 I think, yeah, for the people who have the harder time actually getting up and getting moving,
Mhm.
I mean, I've been there. Everybody's been there. You know, we've been on both ends of the spectrum, and it's difficult because I think most of us have a tendency to try to look at the overall. It's funny. We're bad at zooming out, but we try to.
Mhm.
And we try to at the worst times. And so you're
Oh,
looking at the whole mission that is this goal that you have, and it seems like so much. It seems so insurmountable. And that's when you really need to break it down. And it's, look, just take the first step, take one step at a time, one day at a time, you know, all that. That stuff really works.
it really works.
Because momentum is a real thing. And if
Yeah.
you, once I take, I mean, the hardest part is doing the first thing, but once I start ripping the Band-Aid off, the rest comes off really fast. It's just that initial pull is the most uncomfortable. I don't even feel the rest of it, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Such a good analogy.
I just
That is
made that up. I'm happy with that one. I feel proud of that one.
no, that's so good, because it's true. It's like, and that's what I'm saying. This was a hard concept for me as a coach, because when I first started coaching, I was more on that side of like, you can have balance, you can, you know, if it fits your macros, if like all of these ideas, right? But then I also realized that some people don't need that, and some people won't get results in that way.
Yeah.
And that is where I would encourage you, if you are struggling with your work ethic, with your discipline, that is where I would encourage you to push that other side of the spectrum, and and make a little more sacrifice, have a little bit more discipline, and learn what good can come from sacrifice, what you can gain, what gets added into your life because you put so much time and effort into this one thing and truly committed to it. Like, you are not in the same place as somebody who needs to do the opposite. And the people who are in the opposite are not in the same place as somebody who needs to learn what it feels like to work so hard for something and achieve it, and understand their power and understand how empowering that is, right?
Yeah. Oh, I had a few ideas, and then they just kept more goodness just kept coming out, and I go, oh, that's good too. Oh, that's, yeah. How much there is to gain as far as actual tangible progress, but also fulfillment and self-validation, right? From sacrifice.
Yes.
And there's a trope in the fitness industry that is the exercise you like the least is the one that you probably need the most. Again, that's very oversimplified, right? There are some exercises that are just fucking stupid and I don't like them. And I also don't need them because they're bad exercises
Sure.
or bad variations of exercises. But the same, you know, overgeneralized concept applies here.
Mhm.
What you need to add most to your life is probably
Oh,
something that you are, you know, a little bit afraid of doing and resisting doing.
that is so good. That honestly, like that sentence right there, I feel like oversimplified, but sums up this entire podcast and this idea, because it's truly like, whatever you are resisting so hard, whatever it is that you don't want to do,
Right.
that is probably exactly what you need to be doing.
Right. And a good litmus test for that is if it's something that keeps coming up over and over and you
Mhm.
go, no, and then it comes back. And I'm talking about it naturally kind of pushes into your life.
Yep.
You know, and you keep kind of digging your heels in the sand and not, that's usually a good sign that this keeps popping up.
For
Maybe this is the direction I need to take, as
Mhm.
uncomfortable as it may be. And you talked about the oversimplifying. And this comes back to the brief, not so brief, the point where we made on how we need to change how we consume social media and just be more responsible about how we consume social media.
Mhm.
Social media is becoming shorter and shorter form, which means concepts are going to be more and more oversimplified, which
Mhm.
means they're going to be more and more incomplete. Their purpose is really just to kind of spark an idea so that you can run with it or choose to look into it more. But
Mhm.
what you hear on social media, the ideas that are presented to you, they're not meant to be utilized the way they're presented.
They're not law.
There's more to them than that.
Yes. Yes. I love that. No, that's exactly it. And I think if people understand that, that will really, really help them navigate those feelings of, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And just over questioning everything that they are doing. And at the same time, like, you can always go back to what you were doing.
You can always go back. Nothing is permanent. The good things are not permanent. So enjoy them while you have them.
Yes.
And the uncomfortable shit is also not going to be permanent. And so you can stick it out. You don't need to run away from it. I think that was one of the most, there are a few key lessons, I think, that have been like pivotal to becoming who I am today and how I carry myself. And that's definitely one of them, is understanding that I can sit in discomfort. You know, I don't need to immediately look for a way out, because it's not going to be like this for the rest of my life.
100%.
This too shall pass.
I love it.
I think this is awesome. I don't want to, I mean, I was thinking like, we do 20, 30 minutes. It's been an hour.
I know, an hour later.
Britt, I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you letting me pick your brain on this topic. I appreciate you introducing the topic to me, because this is great stuff. Do you have any kind of parting or final words that you'd like to leave us with?
I don't know. I really think that we said it all. I think that the most important thing, as you reflect on this episode, listeners, I'm talking to you, as you reflect on this episode, whatever spoke to you, that was what you needed to hear. Whatever resonated with you, I want you to tune into that a little bit more and give that a little bit more thought. And also understand that, hey, if this didn't resonate with you, if things that you see on social media don't resonate with you, that message is not for you.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And keep it as simple as that.
Yes. Yes. And I'd add on that too, resonate doesn't just mean something that you liked. It could be something that you felt attacked over. Yes. It could be something that you don't like and you don't want to do, but for whatever reason, it hit you. As long as you're being objective and honest with yourself, which is the hardest thing for us to do. But that's mandatory for everything in this podcast that we've discussed to apply. We have to be able to look at ourselves from the outside in and be objective, and not let our emotions and our desires for comfort or familiarity get in the way of how we think about this and how we go about, acting on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Britt, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. I would love to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. You take care.